This video is part of several videos we're going to be sharing on zoning and official plans. With rising house prices across Canada and the need for affordable, higher density and sustainable builds, there are a lot of changes that need to take place on the municipal, provincial, and federal level to meet the needs of everyone moving forward. I'm Casagrande, the founder of The Conscious Builder, and on this channel, we help you build and live more consciously. If you're new here, go ahead and click that subscribe button, and don't forget to check out the links in the description below. Currently, about 40% of all new homes are built within existing neighborhoods. Our City of Ottawa approved growth strategy and official plan calls for that number to increase to 60% per year by 2046. So that means over the next 25 years, that means 92,000 homes are expected to be built in existing neighborhoods across the City of Ottawa. This means the city has to be very aggressive in revising its zoning bylaw in order to achieve its intensification targets, and that all neighborhoods need to become denser. So in this series, we'll be sharing previous and current strategies, what's going to change, and some creative options that might even get you inspired to reconsider your own living options. Even if you don't live in Ottawa or even in Canada for that matter, a lot of these ideas may be taking place or are being considered where you currently live.
My name is Brian Casagrande. I'm a partner with Foten Planning and Design. Coach housing is a smaller form of secondary housing. And so, in the City of Ottawa in particular, but most municipalities, I would say, in Canada and North America, have different varying options of allowing people to have rental housing either in their existing home or on their property. And so the notion of having a separate dwelling, a smaller dwelling, was established, and the term coach housing was associated with it, where you basically have small one-story houses, and usually in the rear yards of properties that are not independent in any way in terms of ownership. It's entirely a secondary source of income for the owner, and it provides a secondary type of residential housing for people that don't necessarily need larger buildings on their own properties. They have a section of their zoning bylaw that's dedicated entirely to coach housing. It sets specific requirements and performance standards. And if you meet those standards, then you can apply for a building permit. So a building permit is really all that's needed as long as you meet the zoning requirements in the City of Ottawa. And if you don't meet those zoning requirements, there's always an opportunity to vary them by going to the Committee of Adjustment to seek minor variances for some of the performance standards. The benefit that the city offers with coach housing is that they don't have development charges that are applicable. So, on your typical single-family home, development charges are quite expensive. They're in the range of $30,000 to $40,000 depending on where you are and what you're building. So the coach house doesn't actually have any of those charges that it's subject to, but there are building permit fees just like a single family home or anything else you're building. So the sizing of coach housing it's largely dependent on the size of your property and where you're located. So the largest opportunity for a coach house, I believe it's 95 square meters, and that's really reserved for more rural and rural village type locations. But in the the more urban areas, they're capped out at 80 square meters, and then it could be less, and it's oftentimes less. For example, in certain locations you're only allowed to be 40% of your rear yard area. So if you look at your typical lot in the glebe where you might have a rear yard area of something in the neighborhood of 140 square meters, 40% of that, I don't have a calculator with me, but it's going to be in the neighborhood of 65 square meters or so. So you're limited in terms of the size, but comparatively speaking, I mean 65 square meters is it's kind of getting into that small-ish apartment building, apartment unit, if you will, that you would have in a building. So comparatively, I think it's viable. They're limited to one story generally. Again, in the rural areas, they're permitted to actually be up to 2 stories in height. But generally speaking, in the urban areas, the suburban locations, the inner urban areas where you might have the capacity to introduce these forms of housing, they're 1 story in height as a maximum.
I'm Sean Galbraith. I'm an urban planner with Sean Galbraith and Associates, a small urban planning consultancy here in Toronto. Laneway housing in Toronto has existed for generations, but it was never actually permitted. And so every time you wanted to do a laneway house, it would be a big fight with the city. It would probably have a big expensive appeal to the Ontario Municipal Board, and that wasn't creating great outcomes. It wasn't creating a process that was replicable. And for a long time, the city didn't want one. They liked not having laneway suites being permitted, and they would fight you if you wanted to do one. Then in the mid 2010, I think ish, something like that, there started a movement from outside the city to try and get them permitted through a group called Landscape. And Landscape was successful in building momentum for them and getting some political support from a couple councillors. And eventually that sort of bubbled up into the laneway suite permissions that we now have through the Toronto zoning bylaw. The goal was to, expand the range of housing types that can be permitted in a neighborhood. Lanes aren't all over the city. They're primarily concentrated in the former old city of Toronto. And those areas have a very wide variety of housing types, and including laneway suites. And by creating a framework by which laneway suites could be permitted, frankly, very easily, there's a program in Toronto called Expanding Housing Options in Neighborhoods. This was one of the initial phases of a program, the program EHON, Expanding Housing Options in Neighborhoods. Gives people options for how they can live in neighborhoods that are already well suited to them. We have in these areas buildings in the back of lots for cars called garages. Why not have buildings in the back of lots for people? It makes a lot of sense, and it doesn't really create much in the way of impacts. It's a much more efficient use of the land. The main consideration is how far you are from a fire hydrant. This is Toronto's interactive zoning bylaw map. I've just turned the zone layer off. This is just over in the West End of Toronto. I just picked a property on Northcote. I just happen to know because I got a laneway suite approved at 79 Northcote. So I know this block fairly well. If you're sort of in the middle of the block here, you got trouble if you want to do a laneway suite, because let's just zoom in on any sort of random thing here. Apparently I'm as zoomed in as I can get. So let's say you're 49 Northcote. That's not a meter on either side of your property, so you don't have emergency access through the side. So now you need to be within 90 meters of the entrance to the lane, which is, let's see here, which is going to be up here. So how far is this property from the entrance to the lane? So we got the little measure tool, and the entrance to the lane is 139 meters, well outside of the 90 meters. You're not getting a laneway suite on this property unless you demolish your house and rebuild it with 1 meter on the side. Very simple. If you were closer, let's say, and measure, and 81 meters. So 69 Northcote, you could probably get a laneway suite. Not all lanes have this 90-degree turn in them. So for example, on the other side, it just goes straight out. So you need 90 meters from the entrance to Argyle Street. I don't know, let's say about there, what's that get, 79 meters. So maybe out here. 93 meters. So on this block, down to probably, 74, 72 Northcote, you could probably get laneway suites because you have that clear distance out to the entrance of the lane. Do what are called limiting distance agreements, and you can do easements across properties, in which case, you could probably do it. But as a general rule, no, you probably can't. Like sometimes there's lots of properties you'll find where they have like 70 centimeters setback on one lot and then 30 centimeters on the other lot. Combined, you have 1 meter. And so if you can do a limiting distance agreement there, then you're good to go. That would register that on title. The city, I believe, would be a party to that agreement so that the agreement can't go away later without their permission. For some properties, there are ways around it, but like let's pull up, say 72 Northcote. Look at Street View. Yeah, this isn't one of them. There's no way combining those two, you're getting a meter there. Same on the other side. That's not a meter. You're not getting it. You can go, for most lots, you could probably go straight to building permits. Like it's really quite straightforward. And as a result, the city has definitely seen a lot of interest in laneway suites, and a bunch of them have gotten built. I don't know the exact numbers, what the current state of it is.
Glad you tuned in until the end. If you want to support the channel, please check out the links in the video description below, where you will find discounts on passive house plans, discounts on payment processing through Mazuma Go for your business, and of course, the Conscious Builder Academy. Until next time, I'm Casey Gray, and remember to live consciously.